And so if you're ready for a bit of a change of pace, we've got Venus going into Taurus this week. This is, of course, the weekly forecast taking you from Monday, the 30th of March, right the way through to Sunday, the 5th of April. With this forecast, what I'm going to be looking at is the planet on planet action. With that, what I mean is looking for exact aspects occurring in this week ahead. And I'm talking about the main aspects, not all the like semi-sextiles and things like that. I'm talking about sextiles, trines, squares, oppositions, and conjunctions. And yeah, we've also got a full moon in this week ahead too. So there's lots to be going on with. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name's Louisa. Welcome to Feel Good Astrology. Let's see what's coming up, shall we? So what I'm going to do is guide you through this over the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and just really sort of talk about the energies as they're coming in a way that hopefully will be helpful to you, to help you plan your week ahead, to feel into it, so that, you know, if there's something that feels a little bit odd, you might think, you know, there might be some, I don't know, something might come out of it. I tend to astro channel more than anything. You know, when I start looking at a chart, I get drawn in, and then all of a sudden a lot more information comes forward. So let's see what's coming up. So these are the main things that I see going on in this week ahead. And as you can see, we hit the ground running really with Venus going into Taurus and the full moon. These are the two things that are really catching my eye in this week ahead. And as we go through the week, you'll see that there's a couple of other things with Venus. So as she goes into the sign of Taurus this week, she's going to be making a very strong exact square to Pluto and also a sextile to the North Node. So I really see that Venus is shaping this week forwards. Now, let's put this into context a little bit and talk about the energies that were really coming in from last week, because in many respects, they're still ongoing. You know, they don't just kind of fade away. And the main energies that we were really sort of working with last week with these very strong sun conjunctions. So last week, the sun made a conjunction to Neptune and then made a conjunction with Saturn. On that day, when, you know, the sun and Saturn came together, the sun also made an exact sextile with Pluto. And then later on in the week ahead, we had this very exact, very rare Saturn-Pluto sextile. Now, I've been really feeling into this all last week. I took quite a quiet approach last week, and I found myself really getting back to basics, letting go of anything that's really not part of my structure. And I had lots of big plans as well, but sort of big quiet plans, you know, to sort of do quietly, you know, with discernment in the background. You know, for me, last week was a background week. And you could say that Saturn and Pluto in a sextile, and also the sun working with Saturn and the sun also working with Pluto, would at some level be getting us to the base of things and getting us into our core organization and calming things down, slowing things down, and really helping us come into our own new unique position of power. Now, I've learned along the way not to plan ahead too much and think this is how this aspect is going to work. And sure enough, what I thought was going to happen last week actually happened in a different way. You know, I'm much happier now to see that this is going to be a quieter week and a stronger week, but then create some space for what the planets and the energies are bringing forward. And actually what came about was me realizing a load of stuff that I'd forgotten about, lots of work that I'd created, lots of videos, lots of podcasts, lots of tutorials and things like that I'd forgotten about. They were literally in the background. I had to go digging in the ground, and, you know, Pluto is the god of the underworld, like all the earth belongs to him. And they're all very structural, you know, Saturn. And so it was good that I had some peace and quiet because I was able to find that. So no doubt you've been doing your own digging. No doubt you've also been called to slow down a little bit and to reflect more about your own your own power. And in particular with that Saturn and Pluto sextile, it happened, the last time it happened, I think was 13 years ago. It's off the top of my head. I've already ditched last week's notes, but it's pretty rare. It doesn't come around very often. And, you might think, what was I coming into creating at that time? Because this is also a new opening, a new opportunity along the same lines. And so I really do think all things to do with longevity are big themes right now. And so with that in mind, that's also still influencing this week ahead, where we've got this Venus energy coming in. Because if you look, the sun is still technically in a conjunction with Neptune for a few more days. And the sun is also still in a conjunction with Saturn. The sun is definitely still in a sextile with Pluto, and Saturn and Pluto are still definitely in their sextile. So, whatever we're building this week ahead on is actually this revelation of our own stability. And anywhere where you feel like you're not stable, that you're disempowered, is really symptomatic of you needing to slow down and kind of give yourself some rest before you try and think your way out of it. One of the things that I've noticed the most, especially like in recent times, is where we think we can't stop and give ourselves a break before we make the next decision and the next decision and the next decision. It's a misnomer. Like, we think that if we stop, we're going to fall behind. But actually, sometimes when we really stop and switch off from all of the thought forms around us, that's actually when we come into our moment of genius. Of course, you can't have a new thought or a new spark of genius when you're still held in that thought form space that you're currently inhabiting. So this kind of period of time at the moment is allowing us to disconnect, which, again, like Saturn and Pluto, they're not highly social, and they're working together. So it's like we are, it's completely okay to kind of step back right now, and to calmly take some time for yourself to get your own structure right. Funnily enough, something else that happened last week is I gave up a load of things I know are irritants to me. So I gave up coffee, I gave up sugar, I gave up gluten finally. And a week in, I've had the terrible headaches, but I'm feeling much better and much clearer already. And I think my eyes are a little bit sparklier than usual as well. So that's good. So again, another kind of structural, discerning sort of workaround. This is like, what are we fundamentally changing about ourselves that is gonna help us with our longevity? So back to this week then. Venus going into Taurus is going to be interesting. I'll talk about her in a minute, but the full moon, I think, is also worth paying a little bit of attention to. I will talk more about the full moon later on this week. But I really like the energies of Venus. So let's kind of pace through this. I'm going to start off just by talking a little bit about Venus going into Taurus, because, we've got these two different energies. Like, when you look at the position of, say Venus in Aries or Venus in Pisces, or, like Mars in Scorpio or Mars in Sagittarius, Mars will have its own intrinsic energy, just like Venus has her own intrinsic energy. And then all of the signs of the zodiac have their own intrinsic energy as well. Just so happens that Venus rules Taurus. She rules two signs, Taurus and Libra. And it just so happens that her Venusian ways really match in very beautifully with the Taurian ways. So you won't see too much of a difference between their definitions. But Venus is very much most likely known as a planet of love, but she's also about flow and abundance, well-being. And I always think of, she shows you how related you are. So yes, she's about relationships, but she's more than that. She's about the relatedness. Like, how do you relate to everyone? Even if you're not in a relationship with somebody, how do you relate to people? So where Venus is in your chart describes at birth, describes how you relate to people in general. And then where Venus is traveling through your chart will also give you an idea as to what's going on with your relatedness. And I also think of allowance as well. Venus is quite good at receiving things, as is Taurus actually. But allowance, like Venus shows us where we can allow things in and not like block things. Venus and Mars are very much, she's the yin to his yang. They are the masculine and the feminine, Venus being the feminine. Mars is very much about defense and boundaries. Venus is about opening up those boundaries. She's about allowance, letting things in. So when we look at Taurus, the energy of Taurus, I think, really loves stability. It's a fixed earth sign. So it's calm. It's slow. It's very sensuous. It's in its senses because it's ruled by Venus. Everything is about goodness. Like Taurus really love the energies of beauty, taste, lovely smells, things flowing beautifully, like nothing harsh, nothing too difficult. Taurus is a sign that reveres comfort and ease, and it's loyal. It's also cheerful. It's also very natural, and it's very good at receiving. I was just double checking in my head. I was saying I before E except after C. So I've got that right. For a moment there, I thought I'd spelt receives wrong. You never know, do you? And so like on the strength side of this aspect, this Venus going into Taurus, this transit that she's doing from the 30th of March to the 24th of April. So almost a whole month in the sign of Taurus. She's bringing in this potential for us to feel a lot more calm in our presence, a lot more loyal, a lot more generosity, a lot more natural devotion and affection. She's encouraging us to go simple in our relationships. There's a real sort of appreciation of beauty, a value of quality. I mean, Venus and Taurus can be a bit spoilt. That's more on the shadow side. She's more about managing our resources really well, using our resources beautifully. And given that there appears to be a little bit of, and it's a little bit understated to say a little bit, but a lot of disruption going on right now in the world, you could be forgiven for organizing your resources a bit more effectively, a bit more beautifully. I mean, Venus manages her resources beautifully. First of all, she accepts them coming in, and Taurus is very much about accepting. Remember, Venus is about flow and abundance. So we need to accept and welcome abundance as it comes into us. But she's also encouraging us to manage our resources beautifully and perfectly, and with appreciation and gratitude. When we can feel steady and loyal in our appreciation of everything that we have around us, that is Venus's energy beautifully expressed. Now, the shadow side, Venus and Taurus can be a little bit petulant, a little bit possessive, a little bit graspy, grabby, wanting to hold on to things. And so, they might, be a bit slow to forgive, a bit stubborn in love. And also a little bit materialistic and fear of loss. And so what I really see over this next month is this balancing energy that you might feel coming in over managing your good fortune and managing all the useful, beautiful, healthy resources that you have at your disposal versus holding on to your energy, like holding on to things for dear life, like grasping at things. Because when things get stuck, nothing moves, like when you're holding, nothing is flowing. You drop out of the whole ecosystem of flowing resources. Another shadow side is like really comfort seeking, like really almost needing. So I guess needs, like this needing reassurance, this need for comfort, need for like an overindulgent sort of need for things. And so that's something to watch out for. So if you have got, like I've just quick coffee and caffeine, if you do have things in your life that are ruling you that you might need, now might be a good time to get that in balance. Venus in Taurus is going to help you do that. I've given this as an intention, or sort of an energetic intention for Venus in Taurus. I trust what is meant for me will stay, so that you can allow things to move in and out, and just know that if something is for you, it will come back. So, Venus in Taurus is going to be a really interesting energy. She comes in over this next month ahead, because if you've noticed, there's a lot gravitating towards the energy of Aries. And so Venus in Taurus is going to really stabilize us. And, I will be talking more about April as a whole month in another forecast. But as we come to the end of April, Venus gets ready, she limbers up to go into Gemini, and then all of a sudden things really start sparking, because also Uranus is going to move there as well. If we have a look, I want to go to the chart for the full moon and just give you a few pointers on that. So that's happening on Thursday, the 2nd of April. Obviously, I'm giving this from my time zone in London. I'm doing this from just north of Lisbon, Portugal, but we're in the same time zone as London, UK. It might be slightly different according to where you are. But this full moon, so the moon's going to be very much energized in, funnily enough, a Venusian sign, in the sign of Libra. So, this full moon, you could say, is also ruled by Libra and Venus, and Venus is in Taurus. So this is a very Venusian time. This is absolutely about us getting comfortable and feeling at peace in ourselves, and feeling like we've got quiet luxury around us. But the full moon in Libra, one of the big themes about Libra is fairness, everything being fair, everything balancing, and kind of taking the humanistic stuff out of it, like really looking at a really beautiful balance along the way. You almost have to depersonalize it a little bit. But this full moon is likely to bring up really strong feelings about fairness and justice. Now, she's also going to be in a square to Jupiter. That's going to be coming up exactly on the 2nd of April. And she's also going to be in an opposition to Saturn. So this is a T-square. The moon and Saturn, to me, this is looking like young people and also very sort of feminine people versus this strong, older, masculine energy. And then there's the Jupiter in Cancer. Like, Jupiter's exalted in the sign of Cancer. Jupiter is very sovereign. And in the sign of Cancer it's almost like the sovereign family. And so I really do get this feeling like there's this tension around families, this sort of inherent tension between the divine female and the balanced female and the female strategist, like the energy of when you're using your cool, calm, feminine strategy. And obviously everyone can have that kind of strategy, irrespective of gender, versus this very sort of, again, male, not necessarily just for men, but, this kind of male energy of assertion, judgment. It is what it is. This is how it is. Force. So there's this very strong dynamic around the time of the full moon between force, cool femininity, and then this is a bit of a pivot point here. This is I would say, the divine family. How can the feminine and the masculine come together and create a good family? It's really hard when you've got people going one way and another. To me, this is really showing a really strong time of splits. Not to say that everyone's splitting, but where are you split in your mind? So this is the thing that I would say around the time of the full moon. Where are you absolutely split between, in the one hand, saying, do it, like really strong, forceful energy, versus, oh my God, no, this has to be calm. This is how it has to be. Yeah. Now, one of the things that both Saturn and the moon are both connecting with is Pluto, which is absolutely transforming. And so I guess the big question here to hold about the full moon is, how is this full moon transforming me? How am I ready to transform? What am I ready to let go of completely? What am I ready to surrender to be able to sort of integrate these polarized energies? To me, this is like really bringing up a big sort of question. Now, if you've got something between, say, 8 degrees Libra or Aries and 16, 17 degrees Libra or Aries, this is going to really be felt. You'll be really feeling this. I know I've got my my natal Pluto just a few degrees away from this. So this is something I'm going to be watching out for sure. This is very intense. And of course, the next lunation after that, when we've got the new moon, we're going to have the sun and the moon and Chiron all together at 27 degrees Aries. So whatever's going on right now, however we can integrate it, we start moving forwards again at the end of the month. So that's just something to think about. If I just go back to the overall flow of this week ahead then. So, Venus has gone into Taurus. We've got the full moon in Libra. Mercury trine Jupiter from Friday, to me, is an indication that communication should flow and information should feel a little bit more fresh and full. Mercury is always looking for the detail. Jupiter's always looking for the big picture. In a trine, they're quite balanced. I think you'll see how the big picture and the detail work together a lot more than we would usually see. So that's great. The third is actually quite a dynamic day. So that's Friday. The moon's going to Scorpio that day. And we've also got Venus going into a square with Pluto that day. To me, that's also showing this kind of darker feminine energy going on. Pluto is one of the rulers of Scorpio. The moon and Venus are both female planets. So to me, this is like an intense intuitive energy. Venus in a square to Pluto can feel snubbed. She can feel like she's wanting to control things through her beauty, and to control things through niceness, and really wanting to get that right. But then if it goes wrong, the moon in Scorpio energy comes out, and it's the sting in the tail that comes out first. So yeah, Friday the 3rd could be quite a reactive day with information flowing back and forth very easily. But beware of pushing somebody too far, because you might get that sort of sting back, or you might feel under pressure yourself. And then the next notable day, I would say, would be the 5th. Venus goes into a sextile with the North Node. That's good. It feels like things are getting a little bit smoother, maybe. The sun in a square to Jupiter can show where we might want to overindulge, and where things might go a little bit over the top. And of course, the moon's actually going into Sagittarius that day, which really matches that picture. Jupiter being the ruler of Sagittarius. So again, like on the 3rd, we have a very strong Scorpio energy. On the 5th, we've got a very strong sort of Sagittarius energy, which is excessive, a little bit more fun. Let's lift ourselves up. Let's get the party started. So it's an interesting week. But the thing that I really think kind of steals the show would be Venus going into Taurus. So again, just to remind you, that's asking you to get all of your resources ready. Now, not just your physical resources like food and comfort and stuff like that, but your emotional resources. And that full moon in Libra, like, how can you integrate that judgmental part of you with that fair side of you? In one of, I've been teaching astrology in my school community. When we were talking about Sagittarius and Libra, they're both absolutely questers for things being kind of just. And there's a real sort of difference. So Libra is looking for what's fair, and Sagittarius is more concerned with what's right or morally right. Because like fair and legal can sometimes be very different to morality. And so I do think there's something like this going on with, the full moon in Libra, because that energy for things being clean and legal and fair, you know, the judgmental Saturn in Aries is also quite righteous. It's very, very close to Neptune. There's a lot of righteousness. And so this is our challenge right now. How can we integrate these two seemingly completely opposite energies? How can we integrate these ourselves in that, you know, as above, so below kind of way? Because if the world, or the world's media, which it appears to be, is splitting in this way, you know, that there is this strong male, my way or the highway, versus this clean, cool, legal way. This fight is just going to get more and more polarized, especially around the time of the full moon. The more we can integrate this ourselves, I truly believe, and I might sound a bit naive doing that, I truly believe, like, when we're doing this for ourselves and seeing how we can balance these two, all of a sudden there's ripples of that going out to everyone else. But that's just my take. Anyway, coming up the following week, there's a lot more going on. We'll have Mercury and Mars going into Aries and coming into these conjunctions. So there's a lot turning as we go into April. So anyway, wish you a really great week ahead. Now, if you would like to know a little bit more about each of these movements, you'll notice that on these days, I've also got a little bit of information here about, at the bottom, about the moon's positions. And so each day in my free community on the school platform, that's skool.com, I talk more about the moon's movements. And I do a daily forecast Monday to Friday. And then the Friday, it's a Friday in the weekend. So I give free forecasts covering the whole of the week at a much deeper level. So if you would like to know more about that, then just click on the link below that will take you to school. It's www.school, it's skool.com/Feel Good Astrology. And if you need a little bit more than that, then just invite me to work with you. My links are also below. But anyway, have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead and catch up with you all soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.